say that the following statements used as a basis to critique African scholarship are not correct in the form presented, and we hope not to hear these comments like this without references. We do understand that some of these comments may have come from the author Gerald Massey. However, if they did, it should have been cited. These comments have opened up to criticism, and they should have been better stated.
The earliest story of a Sar who had an evil brother named Set. Many versions of the story, who got 72 conspirators to crucify him. You see, Tahuti, we did not worship animals, but Tahuti, the divine nectar, the messenger corresponding to Gabriel in the gospel, announces to the goddess of Set that she gave a divine immaculate conception and virgin birth. Going inside these temples, here we can see an ancient spiritual story where a Sar, here we see, is born in a manger. This chapel is where Haru was born, in a manger, at December the 25th. And here we see the earliest immaculate conception. Immaculate means clean. That means she has known no other man. No other man has entered her body. She will have a clean conception. It's the Europeans who corrupted the story, and now we are looked at as a European Madonna and child, where the concept was copied from here. Keep in mind that the only person who mentions the Immaculate Conception is Luke. Mark doesn't mention it, and then also Matthew doesn't mention it, and John doesn't mention it. Luke mentions it only in terms of being clean. That literally means only one man has entered her body, and that is the seed of a Sar. That means clean conception. That's what immaculate means. Unfortunately, you can't see her on the donkey, because that is too obvious right here.
The Bible says that David took Jerusalem for Israel and named it the City of David. It also tells us that David's son Solomon built a temple there, a home for Jehovah to hold the Ark of the Covenant. Yet outside the pages of the Bible, there is no evidence at all that King David or King Solomon ever lived.
Sad to say, it's not only David and Solomon that don't exist. At least they don't exist in scientific history. It's also really all of ancient Israel up until that time. When I first came to Jerusalem, I went to see one of the leading archaeologists here, and he asked me why I'd come. I said I'd come to find the Israelites, and we both burst out laughing because we both knew that, in fact, it was a very, very difficult thing to do. But in the end, I found them. At least I think I did. I didn't find them here in the walls, and I didn't find them in the pottery. I found them in something so obvious that I'd overlooked it. I found it in the elements that went to make up its greatest memorial, in the written word, in the ancient written word of Israel. Until a few years ago, the written Hebrew word from the time of ancient Israel, the time of Chronicles and Kings, was very thin on the ground. There were just a few ancient seals inscribed with the name of the scribe who used it. Just a few spare sentences. There was very little. Then in 1980 in Jerusalem, there was a minor miracle. Somebody actually discovered a Bible text, dug it up. And it was such a text. It was actually written, just as the prophet Jeremiah said, on sheets of silver inscribed with a pen of iron, a tiny little plaque. And here it is. It's actually a fragment of the oldest Bible text in the world. When it was found, it wasn't laid out like this. Those little cracks that run across it are the results of a very careful unrolling by the conservators. Originally, you see, it had been written on and rolled up very tightly and string passed through it. And it was probably worn on a child's neck. When they started to try and decipher this text, because I don't know if you can see, but it's very difficult to read indeed. The very first word they were able to read was Jehovah. They read it actually 3 times on this plaque before they could read anything else. That was exciting in itself because it was the oldest occurrence of the name of Jehovah in Jerusalem.
The real mysteries. Before I begin, I want to make the following statements. First, I am not a member of the Craft of Amun-Ra, nor am I a Mason. I am a member of the Sons of Africa. Dr. Yosef Ben Jochanan is a member of the Order of the Mystery Systems, OMS. He is 360 degrees double plural. He created the Craft of Amun-Ra in the United States and one component of it is that it is a Masonic organization. One of its instructions is to master first the European mysteries. As a son of Africa involved in the African educational movement, I was around when the craft was being formed. I was a college student. I know many members of the craft, and especially the ancestor William Randolph X, who was a guide to me and helped me with the writing of The Secret of the Ankh. In Kemet, in 1987, I was in Aswan when Dr. Ben revealed the members of the craft of Amun-Ra to a Nubian brother who is a member of the Order of Mystery Systems. I want to pause here to correct something. In a conversation, Sara Suten Seti said that Kemet is a commonest word and that the craft of Amun-Ra uses Tameri instead. This is important to the mysteries because to truly understand the mysteries or African cosmology or the African educational system of the Nile, we must first consult the meta-nature and be self-correcting. Following is what Sara Suten Seti said, and after that is comments from our scholar, Dr. Riketi Ahmed, and her credentials are enormous. Additionally, after Dr. Riketi Ahmed speaks, I have a piece of writing from Dr. Joseph Ben Levy on the subject. The point is we have to be self-corrected. Then I will talk a little bit about the real mysteries and show you primary evidence that it does exist.
Brother Seti, matter of fact, I asked you the first question.
Yes, sir.
You were saying something about we need to stop saying ain't Kemet.
Right. Well,
Build on that.
Kemet is not a negative word, but it's a commonest word. It's what the agriculturalists called the land because of the silk that came down from Ethiopia, so they identified the land by the silk because they was farming. But the actual brothers of the craft, the educational system, calls it Tameri. And most of all the nations on the Nile begin with Ta. Ta-Nahisi, Ta-Seti, Ta-Pimwet, which is Punt. So those are the actual names, the official name that you see in the manuscript, the Purim Peru. You don't see Kemet, you see Tameri.
The actual pronunciation of this is Kim, and this would be Kemet. The way we know that is from dialects of the language. Meta-nature, it is true, is no longer spoken anymore. So one of the first questions that people ask is, well, how do you know how the word sounded, how the language sounded? Well, we know that from dialects of the language. For example, there is a living spoken form of the language, which today we just call Coptic for lack of another term, which is a southern dialect that was spoken up until very, very recently, and is still the spoken language, the spoken liturgical language of the Coptic Christian Church in Ethiopia and in Egypt. So a few priests actually read their Bibles in the ancient Nile Valley language, and they read a dialect of it, a very late dialect, granted, but it is a dialect. Then there is another living dialect of the language, which is Wola, which is the language which is spoken in Senegal, West Africa. And that language has been proven to be the same as Meta-nature on all levels of the grammatical structure of the language. The people call themselves the Kemet youth. As you can see, the difference between this word and this word are the people. This word has people, a man, a seated man, and a seated woman, and 3 strokes, which represent plurality. 3 always represents plurality in the dimension. So this is what they call themselves, the Kemet youth. Now, there are other words in the language to name the country and the people. For example, they also refer to their country as Tameri. Tameri means the beloved land, and that is a term of reverence, or a term of reverence. to call your land the beloved land, Talmeri. They also call themselves Rimech, which was another term that they used to name the people themselves. But that also was a different kind of term. However, the most technical term used in reference to the people and their country was Kemet and Kemet. So this means then the black man, written with our piece of burning wood. And it doesn't mean that the earth, the dirt is black, but it means that it's the people that are black. As a matter of fact, the dirt in Kemet is red, it's not even black dirt. Kemetiu means the black people, very literally, the black people.
In the intellectual warfare of Dr. Jacob H. Carruthers and the battle for ancient Nubia as a foundation paradigm in Africana studies, thoughts and reflections by Dr. Joseph Ben Levy of Northeastern Illinois University, he also makes the following point. The fact that the determinative for land, ta, as used for example in the words tawi, two lands, as in united two lands, upper and lower Kemet, or ta, earth, or ta meri, beloved land, or ta necher, land of the divinity, or even ta nahesi, the southern land, often mistranslated by European Egyptologists as Negro land, Faulkner 1962, page 293. Hence, the determinative for land does not appear in the word Kemet, but the determinative for community or town, Nuet, does appear in the name Kemet. We are also clear that the ancient people of the Nile Valley also defined themselves as Kemetu, literally the black people. It is also significant for us to recognize that what classical Nile Valley civilization, which included ancient Nubia, or to Africans, is equivalent to what classical Greek Rome or to Europeans, Gia, 1974. It is well known by those who are capable of reading and writing the ancient language of Nile Valley called Medu Neter, or divine speech, that the ancient Egyptians did not call themselves Egyptians. One of the key terms they used to describe themselves was Kemetu, black people. They also used another term for themselves as a collective national entity. That term in Medu Neter is Remesh, or people, in the sense of we the people. This term was used in connection with the idea that they were the original people. Of course, they called their country Kemet, the black community or town, but it could just as easily translate as the community or town of the blacks. Joseph Ben Levy. There was a time when it was necessary, as Dr. George D.M. James did in The Stolen Legacy, which was to largely quote other Masons who were of European descent for legitimacy. There was a time. It was Dr. George D.M. James, who was part of the Order of Mystery Systems, who let us know that the Africans gave to the world the mysteries, built a civilization lasting more than 4,000 years on these standards. Lore is that Dr. George D.M. James died a Masonic death for exposing Masonic truths, or maybe he actually died a Masonic death of silence. But as told to me by Dr. Ben, he actually relocated to England years later, and he and Dr. John Henry Clark lost touch with their old good friend. Further research on this subject is necessary.